Tarkov is already a different game in of itself. With so many different mechanics that revolve around the game, it makes sense that from time to time we might slip up and make a mistake. Okay, a lot of mistakes if you're me. I have a lot of bad habits in Tarkov. I suppose it's a byproduct of playing so many different games over the years, especially other shooters. It could be something as simple as just not hitting an easy shot, but most of the time, again, like Tarkov, the habits are a little bit more nuanced, and get me killed more often as a result. I wanted to talk about some of these habits and basically just ramble a little bit about how stupid they are and how often they get me head eyes sometimes. Because at the end of the day, Tarkov is a hard game, whether you've played it for just a few days or even a few years. We all get our asses kicked from time to time, so it's good to reflect on those mistakes and habits to try and remedy them for the future. The first one that immediately pops into my head is my refusal to make noise in Tarkov sometimes. I mentioned this in my covert movement video, but with the way things are right now especially, whenever I go into sneaking mode and I know that there are people around me, it can be difficult to flip the switch and go on the offensive. That's only compounded especially when I know people are vulnerable while eating, reloading, or healing of some kind. It's so hard to get out of the mindset that you win in this game by being aggressive, by being active, and having people around you always on the back foot. This is usually an indoor situation. Normally, if I'm outside on a map, it's not that big of a deal, but when I'm in dorms or the resort especially, I end up trying to be all quiet and calculated, only to have a dude I think I'm creeping up on fly around the corner and kill me with his first bullet because he knew I was there the entire time. Which sucks, and it's kind of demoralizing when you think you're doing the right thing and it blows up in your face magnificently. But it's one of those situations that you have to just take on the chin and learn from. It's okay to make noise in this game, everyone does, and being active is better than reactive. You have more time to figure out a plan in your head and have people acquiesce to whatever it is that you're doing. And this goes double for all your solo player enthusiasts out there like myself. When you don't have teammates to rely on for extra eyes and ears, you need to be making those first moves. Because if you don't, having to be on the back foot is the fastest way to get killed. You don't have to b-hop everywhere and pixel peek every single door. But if you go in the dorms and hear someone hurt and trying to met up, just run at them. You'd be surprised how often that will just work in your favor sometimes. Another habit that gets me killed every now and again is the refusal to splurge on better ammo or armor. With how good players are at the game and some of the nasty angles and shots people hit on me, it begs the question out of frustration sometimes of why wear armor? Why use better ammo? Because whenever I do put the big boy gear on and actually try to chat out, it usually ends in an 8-second raid for me. But now being level 42 and having all the vendors maxed at loyalty and having a decent number of rubles on me, I can't let bad raids be the reason for future deaths. If I want to do something like Zero to Hero or Rags to Riches style raids, that's one thing. I thoroughly enjoy those kinds of raids. That style of gameplay tells a much more interesting story and is something I actually want to try in video format in the future and see where it goes and what happens. But for just normal raids where I'm playing Tarkov and just trying to have fun, if I have the option to run better equipment, there isn't a good excuse not to anymore. I have all the resources I would need to succeed, and yet I still find myself running worse armor and even more egregious, worse ammo. Even after looking at the date, it's been over 5 years since I've played Tarkov. Oh wow. Woo! Distraction aside, it's been a very long time for me, and yet there are still tiny inklings of gear fear deep inside. Why? I don't know. I would argue that that's kind of a good thing because it means I still care about my stuff when I die. But if I don't ever use it, then it's already lost. So it's one of those feelings that I'll eventually have to just shake off. Hopefully. It's funny too, because I even remember making a promise to myself at the start of this swipe that if early on I got some really good gear like an armor or a really powerful weapon, that I would just use it and just commit to it rather than stashing it for later. Yet I have a level 5 CPC armored rig still in my stash for maybe the second or even just the first day of the wipe. So yeah, gear fear is very much still a real thing. Either way, it all comes around eventually. Do as I say, not as I do in this situation. A much more recent bad habit that has crept up because the game around us has changed enough to facilitate this is leaving my guns in full auto all the time instead of being in single fire and switching only when I actually need it. In this day and age of Tarkov, where a lot of the guns have really gross recoil, it makes sense to actually have them in single most of the time, and then switch to full auto when the situation calls for it. It's one of the reasons why I much prefer single-shot only weapons like the ADAR or the new SAG AK. They force you to use these weapons one way. Because of that, you have to adapt your situational awareness around that fact. It's a good check to make sure you aren't just blindly relying on your weapon's full auto capabilities. To be fair though, most weapons that are not fully modded out have very poor full auto, which in of itself is arguably an issue too. But regardless, full auto honestly has gotten me killed more times than I'd like to admit, because that initial flurry of bullets creates so much recoil, by the time you wrangle it in, you're either not aiming for vitals or you're just dead. Aim punch plays a role in this as well, but another can of worms for another time, if I may be honest. Semi alleviates some of that stress, but when you get run up on and only have Semi, that can get you killed as well. So, being in the habit of starting raids in Semi and then switching into full auto when you go into a building or any kind of close quarters makes those kinds of deaths hurt less. Yeah, it can be annoying to constantly switch back and forth, but you're doing yourself a favor in regards to your ammo consumption as well. Every gun is going to behave differently when on full auto. Some are better than others, even when they're not min-maxed, but it pays to try and be disciplined with these modes when you're actively trying to use the right one. I'm sure there are other bad habits that I just can't think of right now, whether it's about movement, or ammo, guns, armor, they all end in death. It's the same thing. I'm curious what others have for bad habits in Tarkov. I can imagine, because this game is so vast, other people who play have a plethora of different bad habits that they would like to break, because their playstyles are probably much different than mine. So I guess my main question to you is, what are your bad habits whenever you play Tarkov? I guarantee you that if you sound off in the comments, other people will either agree or disagree, or even I'll look at them and then see that you have that issue and be like, oh man, why didn't I think of that? So if you have any bad habits that you're actively aware of, please sound off in the comments. I'm sure a lot of us would love to hear how you died, because your habits are just, you're trying to figure those out every day. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and I hope to see you in future ones.